Welcome to the Uplevel Dairy Podcast. This is the podcast for dairy owners, managers, and their trusted advisors who are looking to take themselves and their businesses to their next level of performance, resilience, and success in the dairy farming business. I'm your host, Peggy, and it's my mission to bring you the stories and thought leaders to help take you to your next up level. Thanks for jumping on with us to the Uplevel Dairy Podcast today. And if you're listening on drop date, you know today is the 4th of July. It's the day when we celebrate our freedom. And that is why this conversation today is all about freedom. What you will walk away with are 5 questions that you can ask yourself in your own pursuit of your version of freedom in your life. And here's why it's important. It's important because I know you. I know you as a listener of this podcast. You are either someone who owns a dairy, owns a business, or you work as if you own the business. You are wired, you're motivated, you are driven, you're passionate about what you do. And if you really drill down to it, at the end of the day, we're all pursuing freedom in some version. Maybe it's freedom of time. Maybe it's freedom of finances. Maybe it's freedom to enterprise. Maybe it's the freedom to truly serve in the way we know God's calling us to serve. And hey, a year ago, that's why I started Uplevel Dairy. And that's why I started the Uplevel Dairy podcast, was because I knew I was being called to serve in a different way. And I wanted to create the freedom in my life to do that. But here's what I've learned is that in my own pursuit of freedom, I created just the opposite at certain times. I said yes to too many things. I overcommitted. I created more stress. I created less time in my schedule. I created the opposite of freedom. But I've learned from that. And what I've learned is that left to my own devices, I will do that again. So I brought someone into my own life to hold me accountable for creating the freedom that I truly said that I wanted from the very beginning. The freedom to serve in the way I wanted to serve, and the freedom of my time, the freedom of my choice, the freedom to grow and to enterprise. And that is a business coach, my good friend, Amy Throndsen. She owns a business herself, second generation family business, and she is one of the most intentional people I've ever met. That's something that she brings into her business relationships, her friendships, her marriage. And that is why I asked her to hold me accountable for being very intentional about creating the freedom that I wanted in my life. And so I am sharing her with you today, and I've asked her to prepare 5 questions for you, 5 questions that she has asked me over the last year to help me define freedom for me. And you'll walk away with your own definition of what freedom looks like to you. So Amy, what's your first question for our listeners today?
I would challenge your audience to think about how old will the most important people in their life be in 1 year, which is that's easier to do, in 5 years, in 10 years, and in 20 years. So when my husband and I did this and we wrote down the age of our newborn grandson in 20 years, he's going to be 20. And he was a little baby when we wrote these these letters. So how old will the most important people be in your life? And as we have aging parents, to write those numbers down and to sit with the reality of that. And so how old will the most important people in your life be in a year, 5 years, 10 years, and 20 years? And what do you want that time to look like in between now and then? And we just wrote, we have just 5 envelopes. They're on our mantle. And we just put in actually scraps of paper when we were driving, or when we were just, it doesn't have to be anything fancy either. But I tell you what, when you look at those envelopes, when you see the age of the people that are important in your life, it really, it'll stop you. It'll stop you and make you think about, what do you want to do today, so that in 20 years, when your grandson is 20 and not a baby, that you've had the life that you wanted with him.
Yeah. And Amy, okay, so this is an example of one of the questions that you have challenged me with in the past. And what it did for me and what I hope it could do for others out there, for you that's listening at this moment right now is, sometimes we can get so focused on the growth of a business, right? Like that's where I'm at. And that's where I think a lot of the people that listen to Uplevel Dairy are at. That's why you're here. We're so focused on the goals that we have, the difference we want to make in the world, and sometimes we get so, I know I personally get so caught up in that it's like another week flew by, another month flew by. And when you challenged me with this exercise to really think about the time I have left, right? So, with our 4 kids, we have 2 that are in their 20s, 2 that are, 5 and 8. How many summers do I have left with those little boys? And do I want them to fly by? Do I want them to fly by, or do I want to take advantage of the relationship building time that I have with them while they're still little? Because when doing that exercise makes you think about that, but then also, that bigger picture. What is it that my husband and I want for, our 10 and 20-year life to look like? And what do we need to do right now? Because if we want 20 years from now, if we want our little boys to still want to hang out with us, then we better be cool with them right now. And invest in the relationships right now. And that's just, from the family side. But that's a great question. I'm so glad you shared that, because that is one that I know really pushed me to think big picture about intentionality. Okay, Amy, question number 2, finding your freedom.
So this is a question that I've asked myself for years. It was, how do you want to spend your time and how do you want to spend your money? And as a single woman, those were my only 2 questions. And then when I met my husband, he had adult children, and he added in the question, who do you want to spend it with? So how do you want to spend your time? How do you want to spend your money? And who do you want to spend it with? Those 3 things can really clarify what you'll do when your weekend. It will clarify what your summer will look like. It will clarify Christmas. It will clarify it clarified a lot of things for me and for us. And again, that who piece and adding that in just was a big game changer in my life, because I didn't really have to think about that who. And I think sometimes, especially when you're working really hard in your business and family businesses, they can have lots of layers. And sometimes we forget about that who as being really important. And I think just going back to what you said about intentionality, is that if you're not being really intentional about your 5-year-olds or your 20-year-olds, they will find something else to do. So how do you want to spend your time? How do you want to spend your money? And who do you want to spend it with? And even when I say money, it's not necessarily like some big extravagant vacation or dinner or present or anything. It's just more about that intentionality around making the time, making the opportunity. Some of your kids might need different things in order to spend time with you. And so your resources might be served in different ways based on what people's needs are, but it's who you want to be with, just influencing those decisions.
Amy, okay. So the backup story to this question is, so you had made a visit to our home about a year ago, and that was the first time you met my husband, Kevin, in person. And so background, if you don't know Kevin is, he's an agriculture lender. Kevin is brilliant. Kevin is amazing. Kevin doesn't have time for a lot of things, right? And he's usually a pretty quick judge of people. And so we were sitting down in the basement. Amy was admiring his elk head on the wall and his deer head. Maybe that's why he liked you right off the bat. But as we were sitting there talking, Amy asked me this question: how do you want to spend your time? How do you want to spend your money? And who do you want to spend it with? And my husband, Kevin, that resonated with him so strongly, that it was something that, we wanted to write down, and something that he still continues to bring up a year later is, that question that we need to ask ourselves: how do you want to spend your time? How do you want to spend your money? Who do you want to spend it with? And for me, what that helped to clarify is, as we have our own young growing family, in the past, I did a lot of volunteer service, a lot of volunteer work with kids, with youth in the dairy industry. And in some ways, that question helped me to clarify a little bit about, okay, I actually want to be spending more time with my own little ones right now while they're still little. And I may have to make, I want to now make that choice to spend less time, in other areas that I used to in the past, because like, this is where I want to spend my time right now. And I think, so many of us in dairy, especially, we grew up volunteering. We grew up in 4-H. We grew up, picking up trash for Adopt a Highway and baking cookies and doing all that stuff. And sometimes we just have to be reminded of, okay, is this the right season in my life for doing those things right now? At least that was one of the big takeaways for me, is like, is this the right season for this activity of how I want to spend my time and money and who I want to spend it with? So, all right, question number 3 from you, Amy, finding your freedom.
So this is a hard question, I think, for some people to answer. It is, what does support look like? Because then you have to say what you need help with. And sometimes people really struggle to ask for help. So if you can open the door by asking, what does support look like? And then there's also, do you need to be helped? Do you need to be heard? Or do you need to be hugged?
Oh,
Because sometimes people just need a hug. And as a little bit of a science tidbit fact here, when people hug for 20 seconds or more, the feel-good hormone of oxytocin is released, which creates a stronger bond and connection between the huggers. So just a little tip: give someone you love a hug for 20 seconds, and you'll get that nice feel-good hormone released. But anyway, what support do you need? What does support look like? Do you want to be helped, heard, or hugged?
Amy, I'm so glad you shared this one, because I think it resonates really strongly. Again, going back to kind of the culture of our dairy community, where, I mean, you and I both know we have a list of our friends that are the busiest people in America that are working on dairies every single day. And they are the ones that will never say no. They are the ones that if you need something, you could call them and they would jump in to help. They're also the same ones that it's the hardest for them to ask for someone else to help them, right? That's kind of part of our culture. We take the burden, we put it on our shoulders, but when we actually need something, it can be the hardest thing to actually ask for it. And so thank you for bringing that question in, because even, I'll relate again to this 1 year on my own as a business owner, is asking for help and being okay with receiving help and allowing someone else to help me was one of the biggest challenges that I've had to overcome. But it's also been one of the opportunities for truly finding my own freedom, so that I can set some better boundaries for, like not working when my kids are home, and being able to shut down my computer. And essentially, if I can shut down my computer, I can then shut down my brain a little bit. But what a good, solid question. What does support look like? And it also makes me think, when you talk about what do people need? Do they need to be helped, heard, or hugged? From an employee management perspective, I have these conversations with our guests on the Uplevel Dairy podcast all the time about managing people, right? And sometimes, we think we know what people need. We think we know. But if you were to look at it through the lens of what do they really need? Do they need help? Do they just need someone to listen to them and sit down with them and just be with them? Or do they need a hug? Do they need a hug? Do they need the physical and, and emotional benefits of just a hug, right? So awesome question number 3. Amy, what you got for number 4?
I think so. The fourth thing I'd suggest is, it's not so much of a question as it is kind of a series of questions. So one thing my husband and I did when we started leading meetings for our staff, we'd often have private conversations in front of our employees that was not helpful. So we started having, we call them the meeting before the meeting. And so we would sit down, we'd go through the agenda, we would talk through different areas, what kind of conversation might come up, what would he address, what would I address, What are we ready to talk about? What is something that's still in the works? And so we just really got on the same page. And this will be a broken record for all of the Uplevel Dairy podcast listeners, because I will say communication. So the fifth question is not really a question, it's a statement: communication. When you have communication and when you are on the same page, there is a lot of freedom in that, because you're not getting tangled up in the web of complication, confusion. So we call it the meeting before the meeting. And we just, so it works so well in our professional life. We also, and this might sound really scripted to some people, but we also do this before we have family gatherings, because we are a blended family. And that, and families have lots of layers regardless of blending or not. But that was one piece for us that it really has helped me find a place, and it's helped him because I am more comfortable and I have a way to interact and a way to connect. Because really, even in business or personal, we're looking for connection. And when you can connect, there's the freedom to have relationships develop. There's the freedom, like you're saying, Peggy, for enterprise. There's new ideas that can be had when there's that connection, when there's that trust, when there's just an openness. So in the meeting before the meeting, we have found a way to create space for each other and to help us both feel comfortable and confident. And it just allows for a relaxed, even though it's very scripted, or it sounds very scripted, it allows for a relaxation that's kind of hard to describe. But if you try it, I think you might be surprised.
Amy, that is great. And I'm going to add a little bit more to that of how I think that this also helps to find some freedom of your time. Because, what I've taken away from you sharing that with me is I think you even provided me an outline of kind of writing out, the meeting before the meeting. And sometimes even if I'm just having a one-on-one, call with another person, I will write out and pre-plan that meeting a little bit, ahead of time. And what I found is that those few minutes, it doesn't take long, but a few minutes of intentionality before you get into a conversation can make that whole conversation more efficient, right? And so how often, especially for those of us that are on the industry side, how often are you jumping from one Zoom call to another Zoom call to another Zoom call with barely enough time to take a sip of water or get up and, take a bathroom break? Like what if you built in 5 minutes to intentionally set your mind on the next conversation and break away from the last one and write out what you want to bring into that. And that's level of intentionality is something that you've introduced me to that I try to incorporate as much as I can. And I think it actually helps me find more freedom of my time, because a little bit of front time investment leads to a better and more efficient outcome on the tail end of that. And so Amy, question number 5, finding your freedom.
I love to end with this one because it is how my husband and I end every single day. And we have done it since our second date, because I decided that I wanted to just have this as part of my life. So anyone that I was going to date, I was going to ask them about their positive focus. It's often called a gratitude practice, but we've been doing this since our second date. And it is how we end every day. We say something that is positive that happened throughout the day. And one thing that is kind of fun is I'll sometimes think like I'll know what his answer is. And I don't know what it is. And it's so fun to be able to share that part of just what has been positive for the other person. I think it's the best way to go to bed. It's the best thing to have as the last thing you hear before you go to sleep. And so positive focus, gratitude practice, and how that ties into freedom is I think it's also a way to let whatever funk or nastiness might have been in the day to just go away. And maybe that's a stretch to tie it into freedom. But if But if there were 5 things that your listeners were going to try in the next 30 days, I would highly recommend adding a gratitude practice or a positive moment or, into their day.
Yeah. Okay. I love this, Amy. And I'm a big fan of gratitude practice. I do mine at the beginning of every day. You do yours at the end. And here again, like there was a time in life where I was, and this was even before I was independent, of saying, I'm just too busy. I'm way too busy to take this time in the morning or this time in the evening to slow down and write something down or share something that is, like this gratitude practice thing. Like, what kind of results is this going to produce? How's this really going to help me? And a few years ago, I actually did a 21-day gratitude challenge. And I could not believe what a high impact experience that was, because what I found was that by, here again, you think that you don't have time for this stuff, right? Because we're in this business, people, we're hustling, we're doing all the things. Our plates are so full. Where on earth do I have time for, a couple of minutes? Well, you know what? If you have a couple minutes to scroll on Facebook and, and get nothing out of it, or scroll on Instagram, you probably also have a couple minutes that you could intentionally set aside and write down or share or just focus on something positive or something that you're grateful for. And this has been a game changer for me. Like I said, I did a challenge a few years ago and I never quit doing it. It's something I do every single day. First thing when I wake up in the morning, and I write it down in my journal, and just thank the good Lord for the gifts that He's given and what He has done in the past, what He's doing today, and what He's got moving. So, Amy, there were 5 things I asked you to share. I'm going to put them in a form of questions, and I hope our listeners can jot these down. If not, they can head over to upleveldairy.com and they'll be able to find in the show notes a list of what these questions are. But they are these. How old will the most important people in your life be 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 20 years from now? Write it down, put it somewhere you can see it, and really think about what that means to you, and how that can start to determine the way that you spend your time and where you put your focus, and how that can actually help you to find the freedom to create the life that you really want. And question number 2, how do you want to spend your time? How do you want to spend your money? And who do you want to spend it with? If you are looking for finding that freedom of time, finding that freedom of choosing, where you want to put your time and energy, that is the question to ask. And question number 3, what does support look like? Support is the key to freedom. Having a team, the who, not how. You and I talk about this all the time. Jay Joy has talked about it. Book by Dan Sullivan, Who, Not How. You've both mailed me the book. Hello, was that not a hint? For a solopreneur who's trying to build a team of support. And so that's question number 3. Question number 4, are you having a meeting before the meeting? And you spoke to the value of that on the business side, on the personal side. I know it's important for me, to just have that preparation going into things. Question number 5, our last question, what are you grateful for today? What was a positive thing that happened today? We're not looking to overcomplicate this, but just for one moment, we all have time to shift our mindset into something to be grateful for, something to be positive about. And this is so important right now in our dairy industry because it is tough. It is tough. We are at the valley. This industry is peaks and valleys, and you're going to hear more about that on episodes in the next few weeks of the Uplevel Dairy podcast. It's peaks and valleys. And right now we're in a valley. So that means that even though you think it might be more important to think about everything else right now, the most important thing you can do for yourself and for your clarity and for your business and for your own freedom is to look for that positive thing, that's something to be grateful for at the end of the day or the beginning of it. And with that, these are the 5 things that we wanted to share with you today on the Uplevel Dairy podcast on this day, the day when we celebrate our independence, the 4th of July. And we hope that we have helped you to find some freedom in your own life and give you a roadmap to really articulate what that might look like. So Amy, any last thoughts to add?
No, it's just been a pleasure to have this conversation with you, Peggy. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Amy. And we appreciate all of those out there listening during this holiday week. Go out and find your freedom, friends. Thank you for listening to the Uplevel Dairy Podcast. I'm your host, Peggy Coffeen. And if you like what you heard today, go ahead and head on over to upleveldairy.com to read the blog and join the Uplevel Dairy email list so you can receive new podcasts, blogs, and special offers coming soon from Uplevel Dairy straight in your inbox. To listen to more episodes, head over to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or YouTube, and don't forget to rate and review. Connect with me, Peggy at upleveldairy.com, and follow Uplevel Dairy on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn.